Hi, good morning, and thank you so much for taking out time today. And first and foremost, for joining us at AISS 2025. This year we are looking at making it even bigger, and that can only happen when people like you join us. And second, for joining us for critical conversations that we have planted for the CXO groups, and their own pertinent themes, which are reflecting on your calendar invites, which I have shared with you. But the contribution is very important. And I have with me today the Akamai team, which is going to talk about something which is part of our daily life, API security. And what is important to understand is, let's try and go beyond what we just see on a daily basis. It's not about the company only. I'm just taking the liberty of saying this right now, but it's about the technology enhancements and the innovation that are happening in this space. That is the most important part today, because reality is the darker side is much more advanced than us, and they are much more advanced because they are much more united. Unfortunate reality for us is that we do talk about unity and diversity and united we stand strong, but we fail. And we fail because we have guardrails, we have challenges, business challenges, which cause us not to share critical information on time. But I think when we use technology as the enabler, it helps us. And that's where I have the team from Akamai. I would like to welcome you guys. And we'll start this conversation in the way we had planned. Many of you have been part of these engagements earlier also. So the format remains similar. Let's try to plug in insights from all of you into what they have to present as well. So over to you,
Thank you.
Sheldon.
And you guys can hear me in the back clearly? Perfect. Cool. So today's topic is about API security and AI. I'm sure a lot of what you're going to hear in the next 3 days is AI is going to be beaten down into you pretty much. And what we've attempted today is not to necessarily talk about how our product uses AI. Obviously, it does use a little bit of AI, a whole lot of ML. But the concept over here is just to probably brief about where we're going, what's going to happen in the AI world, and then sort of tie it back to the security world, right? So my name is Sheldon Fernandez. I am a solutions engineer here at Akamai. Been at Akamai for about 7, going on 8 years. Along with me, I have Chinmay. Chinmay is also a solution engineer. He's my peer, and he'll be walking you through a lot of what we do on the API security layer. The first 10 minutes is going to be about AI. Second layer is going to be about API security, and then the third piece we're going to be talking about is an interactive session where we will walk through a breach, something that is very closely related to a few incidents that we've seen throughout the year, right? So let's get started with my part. Give me a second. Yeah, and for the AI part, I think what we wanted to do was essentially break it down into 4 different acts. So the first act is, how did we even get here? Why is it important? The second act is jumping into the future, right? So what is the agentic internet? How is that going to look like? It's a little far-fetched, and I want you to indulge me in this conversation because I think it's going to be fairly interesting. And then obviously the foundations of what we're building today, right? Not just about Akamai, but the world and the internet as it stands. And then lastly is how do we tie that back to API security? So to get started with, and I want this audience to just be completely free. There should be mics being passed around. Has anybody heard of this paper? That's anybody? Just raise your hands. Attention is all you need. Is essentially a paper that came out, and I just want a quick show of hands. Has anybody heard about this or talked about this? Heard about it? Perfect. Anybody else? Two. Okay. Cool. So attention, all you need is a paper that came out in 2017. It's a paper by Google Brains, which is an internal unit within Google. And essentially, this paper is foundational in everything that we talk about. When we talk about modern AI, this is the paper that started it all. So just to give you a little more background, we won't jump into the weeds of it. I know this is a security conference, but indulge me. Before 2017, there were a few ways of how you would look at AI, right? Learning models. There was something called the recurrence neural network, and LSTM, which is long short-term memory. And essentially, all of these models, the way it could learn stuff was to reach each line. So if the dog barked at the black cat, the model would take each word, learn it in its strict piece, and then sort of move forward by building context over it. Now, this is where you would have started to see things like autocorrect, Grammarly coming out. It had the ability to understand how these models work and correct them. But we were never able to go in a large parallel manner and understand pages and pages of text. That's what this paper essentially introduced. It was pivotal, right? And it introduced the technology called transformers, and I'm sure you'll start to hear this the more you get in depth, right? I'm sure many of us are engineers over here, you'll start to want to understand how is ChatGPT forming, how is Cloud working, how is Gemini working. So the transformer architecture essentially built out something called attention, and it allowed the ability to understand how data should be processed and how these AI models will be able to look at all the words together and understand them. The second major piece was the scalability. And that is why people like to talk about, oh, we need to buy NVIDIA chips. Akamai bought a whole bunch of chips right now, and we are doing inferencing at the edge. But it is this architecture that allowed us to run things in parallel and create these massive, massive models, right? Just to give you an example, ChatGPT 4 had 1.8 trillion parameters, right? And parameters essentially talks about how expressive an AI model is. And then lastly, again, like I said, this is the foundational of everything. ChatGPT, Claude, Gemini, Llama, you name it, all of those models use it. So the takeaway from this slide is that this paper just did not improve AI. It fundamentally redefined AI as we stand today, right? And what's more important is, while this paper changed everything that we stand, it is essentially going to change the infrastructure of the internet, right? AI models changed. We're going to be talking about the infrastructure as the internet as it stands today. And that is where we start to get into the concept of Internet of AI agents. Okay, cool. So far, hold on. I'm going to tie it back to security, so give me a while. But and has anybody heard of the Internet of AI agents? Because this, I'm sure, at least this group would have heard about a little bit. Any hands? One. Anybody else? 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, excellent. This is a little more far-fetched, so think about going into the future and trying to understand what this means. Essentially, it's going to be an ecosystem where you have agents talking to other agents and performing tasks for you. For example, and this is an example that the MIT professor that's sort of building on this talked about, is where he has a child, and his child is really into Frozen, which is a animation movie, and he wants to throw a birthday party for her. And what happens is he talks to his agent saying that he has a budget, and essentially the budget is XYZ dollars, and that agent is going to talk to his daughter's agent and figure out what she likes, and basically then it's going to go talk to Target and maybe Walmart and understand all the different birthday items needed, and eventually all of these agents will be talking to each other and then present him a budget at the end of the day saying that for budget X, Y, and Z, these are the 3 different party themes that we can throw, right? So it's going to be a fundamental shift from how we access the internet. Today, if I have to log in, let's say I need to buy a ticket, I go to Make My Trip, it's my favorite portal, so I'll go there, it'll load a web page, you have JavaScript, you have CSS, you have UI, but all of this is going to be fundamentally changing. If AI agents are going to access APIs, and APIs are going to be the driving force, then we are going to start moving from a human-driven internet to a machine-driven internet. And this is not too far-fetched. If you look at some of Akamai's State of the Internet reports, I think as we stand today in 2025, bots have surpassed internet usage versus humans, right? 51% of the internet traffic is bot-driven. Largely, as in there's a sharp rise. I think somewhere in 2024, it was sitting at 42%. Now we're sitting at 51, largely driven by LLMs. And this is not going to stop. The internet is going to change. And that's where one thing, if you all walk away from today and don't remember anything that Chinmay I have to say, is go take a look at Nanda. Nanda is a project that is started by, I think, MIT and a few other US colleges. And this is very, very similar to what the Internet of Internets, network of networks started off as in the 1980s, where colleges were forming different groups and connecting to each other and trying to understand what this means, right? So this has already started. The project's already started. Essentially, the papers are going to be talking about how we need to change DNS infrastructure, we need to change server infrastructure to sort of manage this decentralized internet, right? But the key over here is the foundations of this future internet is being built today with folks, with you, I, and the developers out there, right? So for example, if you think about when the internet started, we wanted to build like multiple, you had network of networks, and we wanted to build protocols. That's when things like TCP came out, right? IP, Internet Protocol, HTTP, which is another protocol. These protocols are being built today. And one of them, I am sure you would have heard of it because this became quite viral, is the MCP protocol, which was essentially created by Anthropic because what they needed to understand is how do we start connecting my LLMs, my AI agents to different services. And this is where concepts like, okay, now Salesforce has an MCP server, Slack has an MCP server, Microsoft has an MCP server. There's going to be listings of all the different MCP servers because ChatGPT can't do anything by itself. If I wanted to send an email, it can create this very elaborate email, but it can't send anything. It needs an MCP server to provide tools, resources, and prompts, right? So this is one of the protocols that's getting built out. The second protocol that's also getting built out is A2A, or agent-to-agent conversations. This was initially created by Google. IBM also helped them in building this out, and now it's been given to the Linux Foundation to be an open source tool. Again, these are protocols that are being built today for the future. And the underlying idea over here is everything is going to be based on HTTP, RESTful protocols, and that is where the APIs come into play, right? The APIs we protect today become the foundations for tomorrow's agents. And that is why you need to start thinking about API security. It is no more essential, it is foundational to your business. To whatever business you have, start taking a look at it. And that is why Akamai has been so pushing this idea of API security. We not only bought one company, we bought two separate companies, combined them together, added Akamai's own intelligence to it, and now we have a product called API Security that actually a lot of Indian customers are already using it, all the way from PubSec to BFSI to e-commerce. And this is where I'm going to introduce Chinmay to sort of walk you through the solution and so that you understand that it's far beyond security. We're looking at governance of APIs and what those APIs mean to you. So, Chinmay.
Thanks, Shelly, for setting up the context. I hope folks at the back can hear me now. So, as Sheldon set the context right, we have we're not just like in plain sight speaking about APIs being foundational to the infrastructure that you have right now and the infrastructure that is going to support your AI journey, but it's basically like the studies that we have done that point out to those numbers, wherein like more than 80% of the attacks which are happening are foundationally happening on your APIs. And that number has only grown since 2023 by a few percentage, right? And this year as well, like we expect the number to further grow because it's a matter of an attacker or an adversary discovering your API that you don't know about and exploiting it, and literally like taking the whole application for a ride over there. The other thing that is pretty much more interesting is that a lot of times the visibility that you have within your landscape, your API real estate is something that is only limited to what you have developed. But what we kind of discount for is what are the other APIs, what are the other softwares that we are running over our infrastructure which are foundational for the application to work. And I'll give you a straightforward example. Back in 2012, when I started working as a developer, I used to develop PHP websites. And I used to install, and it was kind of a regular practice, install a component phpMyAdmin to visualize the database. Now, we never knew that moving that component over to the production systems and making it accessible for anyone, it's just a matter that someone knows as a dev that you might be running a phpMyAdmin and what's not stopping them from just accessing that path. If they do, the password combination is plain and simple admin admin, and they get access to it. That was, in today's day and age, it's more primitive, but the idea remains the same. You might have those components, you might have those third parties that you're using for your application to function in your production environment, and these endpoints might be exposed. And if you can do a quick show of hands, I mean, I just wanted to check if you have a visibility of all the APIs that you own or are running over your infrastructure. If you can just have a quick show of hands. If you have a number that you have in mind, even a ballpark, I'm sure the room remains the same, right? So the idea is to basically arrive or start with not just a tool or a practice overall, but more towards how do you develop the whole governance model around it? How do you develop a governance model and policies within that model that govern the entire API lifecycle? And that is basically the foundation of where we start. If there is anything that I want you to take away from this session, is this slide. It's not the features that I'm showcasing. It's basically the stages of an organization maturing, because you start at discovering where you are. In security, we loosely speak about you can only secure what you can see, right? And you're as secure as the weakest link in the whole chain of things that you're running. But then, where do you start? And you start with discovering what you're running right now. And that's the first and the foundational step that you need to begin with. Irrespective of what tools you're using, irrespective of what policies you're imposing, but that is where you start. The next thing is to figure out where you are right now. So once you have discovered, you figured out that these are the APIs that I'm running, this is my attack surface, where do I stand, maybe in a quantification manner, or maybe in terms of understanding how many critical flaws are there within my current ecosystem, right? And then it's a two-pronged approach. One, you gear up, you start fixing what you already know of being flaws within the ecosystem that you're running, which is to have security run in the runtime in line to the traffic that your origin is seeing, your servers are seeing, and ensure that those critical flaws are not exploited and are discovered by you before any adversary, right? And while you're doing that, you also start looking at the foundation of it, that now onwards, whatever I'm going to deliver in my production environment has to be secure. We have come quite far to discover that security should have started at the front or at the first step itself. And then we have to balance it out when a lot of folks will tell you that you should look left, you should shift left. But then you essentially have to balance it out how your governance roams around shift left and a shift right balance overall. So this is essentially like your model, how you should look at securing the basic foundation layer of all and any application that you're running right now. Now I'll deep down into each of these stages just to highlight what I'm actually going to come towards in terms of concluding this piece. So first thing is discovery, which is basically understanding what is the API traffic which is within my north-south and east-west communication, plain and simple. And that sounds straightforward, but execution of that is something that requires you to look at firstly how your architecture functions. Because a lot of times the business is focused upon getting new features out in the wild, right? Develop new features, release those features out so that we have our end users benefiting from those users, and then we think about security coming in and how do we secure all of that, which is the current state of affairs with AI. A lot of organizations, I'm sure you all would agree with that as well. The business is focused upon what can you do with AI today, and we'll think about securing it later on once we figure out a business case about the AI, right? But then, from a security perspective, you need to firstly understand what you're running, and that requires you to first, what are the API endpoints? What qualifies as an API endpoint that is leaking some data to my end users or to my server-to-server communication? The other thing is what is the data specifically which I'm leaking? Is it the email IDs? It is the PII data? It's Is it PCI data? If I'm into insurance, then is it the insurance policy ID? Things around that. All that data types that I'm leaking. And we kind of help you with looking at those pre-built data types which come out of the box, but we go to an extent wherein we can help you define your own nomenclature into custom data types, because we understand for each organization there is a specific nomenclature that you would follow for your internal naming purposes, and if you want to detect that. The third thing is what changed and when it changed and who changed that. These three questions are foundational to understand how the versioning has changed, what are the changes that my dev team is introducing that increases or decreases or fixes the attack surface that I'm adding into. And then also to discover what else can be exposed or is exposed to the outside world that I'm not aware of at all. That is where the reconnaissance part comes in. Doing a non-intrusive scan on a continuous basis to figure out what an attacker sees, because as I said initially, you can only protect what you see, right? So that's there. And then you tie it all back with the source code inventory which is there, which is your version controlling systems. You integrate that with it so as to understand what is the root or what is the core which is powering this whole thing. So that's basically like where the full API inventory piece comes into the picture, wherein we talk about discovering the APIs which are there. We clearly highlight how many hosts are seen, how many API endpoints are seen, and we need to integrate with a lot of existing products that you're using right now to discover east-west traffic, to discover north-south traffic. And I think we are the only tool which is there which has more than 40 integrations to integrate. We can integrate not just with your WAFs, your CDNs, your load balancers, but we can even go as deep as L3 devices wherein we can deploy sensors and detect what is the traffic that is flowing and what is the nature of that. And the moment we get deployed within your environment, we start enumerating, we start inventorizing the API-specific traffic that we see. The next thing which I highlighted previously was to understand what data you are exposing. And this is where actually you start to contextualize that, hey, okay, I have an API. The API gives me a few data points that is required for that workflow to work or go ahead. But then what are those data points? What category do they fall in? Not just from a compliance perspective, but also to understand what you are exposing. Is it really required? All of these questions are what you will ask once you look once you're into a reactive mode, once an event has happened or an attack has happened. But why not right now? So being from a proactive approach perspective, you enumerate what all data types you're leaking. And then you arrive at where you are right now. I know what all my APIs are. I know what data types these APIs are sending out in the wild. And I want to know where I am right now in terms of securing that. And while we've done POCs of our product with customers, what we have seen, one, an eye-opener, which is a lot of times like customers have an understanding of, hey, I have 400, 500 APIs that my team is working upon. These many APIs are powering this application. These many APIs are for my internal application, so on and so forth. The first eye-opener is that when we run through the whole discovery process, we discover 4,000 APIs instead of 400. 3,000, 4,000 APIs, it's a huge number when it comes to looking at that. You are only looking at 10% of what's really running on your infrastructure, what you're paying in terms of your infrastructure cost and what you're exposing out. The second thing was the data that you're exposing. And then the third thing is from a posture perspective, that from a security standpoint, if I look at how my APIs are functioning, just as an example, there are JOT tokens which are being used by my APIs which have expired 30 minutes back, but still my API is responding back to it. Why is that happening? Because tomorrow if an attacker discovers it, I'm a sitting duck in that case, right? So we try to highlight where the flaws are, what are those misconfigurations which are there, and what is the infrastructure tied behind that. A lot of policies, you have, like your infrastructure teams have done in terms of improving the metadata, the tagging that you do over your cloud environments, right? We leverage that tagging to give you a view of, hey, this is the API that we discovered, these are the data types it is leaking, and this is the infrastructure which is powering it. And then going further ahead and highlighting that this is the repo on your GitHub or GitLab server that has the code that is powering this API. That gives you all tools, that gives you everything that you need in order to now action upon. And that's basically where we will go towards in our phase of maturing towards the API lifecycle. This next thing is to understand your API attack surface. A lot of jargons in this field wherein we speak about attack surface management, but what essentially it is, if we break that down to first principles, it's basically knowing what can be seen from the outside. For someone who doesn't need to log into my environment, doesn't need to get connected to my network, what all can they see? And can I control that or not? And that is where the reconnaissance piece comes in, wherein we give you what an attacker would be seeing right now if they were looking at you in the right fashion. Beforehand, they get to look at it. And then we highlight that these are those areas where you can fix things up. And that becomes essential when you're talking about developing more AI features, getting more LLM models to be used for different purposes, maybe a chatbot, maybe something like a recommendation engine for your end users. But then that is all exposing certain endpoints outside, that is all exposing certain attack surface outside, which is out there just to be exploited. Now, while we are speaking about posture, we should also look at what is known and unknown. We started, like the whole evolution started from a WAF, which now is basically a signature-based detection. What happened with you should not happen with me. I have a signature and I can look at it. But where do we leverage AI to secure rather than securing AI itself is where this piece comes in, which is feeding the genuine traffic or the traffic that we see into a machine learning model, which kind of creates a baseline, as in this is the regular traffic that this application should be seeing. And then highlighting those anomalies away from that regular traffic that we see from that baseline that we have. And that is basically how you look at the unknown piece of it. That's how you discover the 0 days, which are there to be exploited right now. And that's essentially like the visibility that you gain once you go ahead. The third piece, and this is where we go for a two-pronged approach, which is that now you know what you are running, now you know where the flaws are, how do I ensure that now that I discover from day one, how do I ensure that I don't get exploited on day two, right? And that is where the real-time security piece comes in. We integrate with the devices which are, or the softwares or the security layers which are there in line with your traffic. And we instruct those layers that, hey, we see that this is not a normal traffic and you need to block this source, you need to block this request per se. And that is where you start creating that mold around your castle, right? So real-time detection is something that starts from here while you're protecting what you have already exposed and now that you know of it. But then you also start working towards blocking the active attackers which are being discovered. You also look at blocking the known surface which is there and go ahead with training the ML model to become more automated in that fashion. Once you, so the good thing about AI and ML, using ML in security is that once you take certain actions, the model trains itself and it knows that or it predicts what your next action would be in a similar scenario. And that is what helps you to have more efficiency while you're already low in the team members and the effort that you can put in, right? So that is there to block the active attackers. And then the other prong which is there is the testing piece. Now when I say testing, what I mean here is, here is where you draw that balance between shift right and shift left. While you have all your layers protecting you in runtime, while you're discovering new APIs, your developers are also working on releasing newer versions of those APIs. While they are retiring older versions, but there are new versions which are being developed, and there's a high chance if you don't follow the governance or you don't apply that governance to that layer of developing new APIs, it's a high chance that you're going to see the same thing again and again, right? So that is where the testing piece comes in, which is you create those stages in your CI/CD pipeline, wherein if a developer, and coming from a development background, it's never a KPI for a developer to write secure code, but the higher value is if I can write quicker code, if I can get the execution done quicker and release those features in prod as soon as possible, right? So that is where the developers are focused on. But within your CI/CD pipeline, if you can create those stages which are automatically detecting if there are any flaws within the code that is being pushed or merged with your main pipeline. And this is a foundational step towards maturing the whole organization in terms of the governance policies that you create to ensure that while I'm making sure that I don't get my existing attack surface doesn't get compromised, I'm also ensuring that new attack surface doesn't add to it. Right? And that is where that shift left piece comes into the picture. And this is the headline of this is that essentially you want to arrive at a stage where you are delivering secure APIs faster. Secure APIs by getting those checks and balances early in the stages of CI/CD integration, and faster by automating them. And that's how you are going to leverage the newer protocols that are being built, the new advancements that we are having in tech on a day-to-day basis, even the ML models, even the AI agents within this piece. So yeah. Now, in terms of deployment, just highlighting in terms of how you can deploy this product, or how there is no way that you cannot secure an on-prem environment or a hybrid environment or a cloud environment. It's basically like not a question as of right now in terms of any product that you use, right? So we can deploy in your on-prem data centers, looking at your east-west traffic, securing the internal apps. We can deploy within your cloud environments. We are agnostic of the environments which you have. We can help you to comply with the regulatory guidelines as well in terms of data security, in terms of keeping your data within the bounds, and so on and so forth. So all of those deployment options are available. And then arriving at why you should let us manage or us help you, and why you should even be hearing about this thing from us. And that is where the expertise comes in, because at any point in time, like I'm sure at any point in time, we are looking at more than 40% of the internet traffic. And in today's day and age, to keep up with the ability to detect, which is the core of any security solution that you use, is basically saying a yes or no, that if it's a clean traffic or not. All of that is defined by an ML model. Any vendor, anyone who is running that has an ML model that is at the core of their machines, right? And is taking that decision. And ML, by the nature of it, is as accurate as it gets when you have a larger data set. Because you need to train that, you need to inference out of the trained data. And the larger data set you have, the more accurate and more advantageous it is for you in order to arrive at a conclusion if something is malicious or not. And that is the edge which Akamai brings in order to power all of these security solutions that we are talking about, including the API security piece. So with this, I'll hand it over back to Sheldon to talk about the case study that we guys have brought in. And I think we can distribute those papers as well, so as to give you more insight into it.
Thanks, Chinmay. But while those papers are being distributed, any questions on the actual topic that Chinmay talked about, especially the 4 pillars when we talk about API security? Okay, I think there's a question back there. There are a few questions out here. Can we have mics? Do I have anyone from Akamai here? Could you help me with mics? Okay, we have one mic over here. There's a question, there's a lady over there, and there's a question from there, question there.
I think great presentation. Quick question.
Yes.
You talked about the initial discovery stage. I want to understand, you talk about known and unknown parameters from a threat actor standpoint. So do you have an inbuilt threat intelligence already,
Sure.
or is it customizable?
Okay, cool. So, so discovery is more about just understanding what the lay of the land is for all of your APIs. It is building how each request looks like, what is the open spec file for that, what are the different parameters within that. That's the discovery piece. For your question specifically, ma'am, Akamai obviously has its own threat intelligence. So whenever there's a quote unquote a runtime attack, let's say there's an API that is coming and they're hitting your API and they're trying to extract information, we obviously understand what a typical RPS looks like for an API. We also understand the typical volume of data that goes out. But what the tool is really good at is understanding in that volume of data, is there any PII data that goes out? In what volume does it go out typically? And then obviously around the IP addresses and so on and so forth, Akamai has this intelligence. Just to give you, I mean, we are talking about Akamai, so I'll just give you a little interesting piece. Akamai tends to see every IPv4 addressed in existence once per month. And every time it comes in, Akamai gives it a scale of 1 to 10 of how well that API is behaving. So tomorrow, let's say Coca-Cola is there, I think it's an Akamai customer, and we can keep that for later, but let's say if an IP is attacking Coca-Cola and tomorrow that same IP comes to your website, we will have that intelligence to understand, okay, this IP is nefarious. Now, how it's using our APIs, it'll probably raise the score or drop the score, so on and so forth. So,
Relative question, thank
Yes.
you.
Just before that, sorry, no, just again, when you ask the question, please introduce yourself once, so
sure.
others need to know each other.
Sure. Thanks. I'm Akanksha Singh. I'm part of S&P Global, so I'm leading infrastructure security and risk management. Also, in terms of the way you talk about API keys, does the system also rotate those keys? Because as far as different vendor tools, when you talk about integrations, right, is that something that Akamai as a tool or a platform takes care of, or is it something that's still vendor dependent?
100% vendor dependent. So one piece that you'll need to realize is Akamai's API security tool is an out-of-band solution. We don't sort of sit in between your requests. We're not modifying the requests. We're just simply sitting at the side, looking at each request and response, and probably whispering in your ear that there's something wrong over here. So no, what we can do as a parallel is, and I've seen this happen is, especially in the Microsoft Azure world, when you start using these keys, we identify if they're shared auth keys being used. So if I see the same auth key being used by multiple consumers on multiple APIs, I will point out that there is a shared key. It does look like it's going to be used for authentication. Why do you have one? And more so if there's sensitive data as in the response. Like, okay, the shared key is using privileged data now. So we'll highlight that. We can't change anything though. Sure. I think there were a few more questions. There's a gentleman in the back over there. I don't know, do we have another mic? No, we'll take it first. Okay. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
Hi, Sendil from Karvesha Bank.
Yes.
Actually, in the discovery part, you mentioned that only 10% of that APIs are inventorized, and you found more than that.
Yeah.
So there will be false calls, right?
Yes.
There is necessarily false calls, positives or possibilities there.
Absolutely.
How you will handle that? Because some cookies or some other calls which is between the applications also coming in this discovery part.
Yes.
Because that's one of the point which is raised by ITE.
Okay. So if I can just rephrase the question is, you're saying there's an inventory that we're building out, but from that inventory, there might be some APIs that are actually not part of your inventory, correct?
Part of inventory, and IT will claim that it was not part of API itself.
Not part of the API itself. Okay, cool. No, all valid points. So you're right. The way we do it, specifically the way Akamai does it, is every time an API request comes in, we will not count it as an API until and unless we get a 200 OK from your server. And our rationale is, if your server is giving a 200 OK, that means you're accepting the API request, and we'll mark it. Now, what's even more important is if your IT guy then says, dude, we don't have this API, it's not really, I have evidence. I collect samples for every request. So tomorrow you say you have 40,000 APIs, there's a very good chance I have collected 40,000 APIs times 5 samples for each API. Technically, my tool collects 5 good examples, so 5 200 OKs, 5 400XX, and 5 5XX, right? So we collect gamuts and we give it to you so that you can tell the developers, listen, I have proof, a full request, a full response. Okay, the gentleman in the back was really waiting for a while. He raised his hands. I just want to make sure that he gets a chance. Do we have another mic? Perfect. The gentleman in the navy suit. I think he's going to turn it on.
Hello. Yeah.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Sahil Gupta, working as a information security architect in Tata Digital.
Wow.
So, few questions, two in the matter of time. First, related to the agents, once those are deployed in, say, the ecosystem of the organizations, does that collect PI data back to the Akamai to train their AI model? And the other part to it is that once we rely on Akamai for this, do we get any poisoned model output back to our agents which are installed locally? That is the first part of question. The second is related to CI/CD.
Okay.
We follow the same approach related to branch protection policies where we implement so that anything goes as a part of goes as a secure code, right? So just wanted to understand the insights of it, how this API security or from Akamai will be integrated as a part of CI/CD.
Sure. So let me take your first question. Chinmay, feel free to add at any point. So first of all, I like talking about AI, but I'll be upfront. My solution does not have any AI. Okay. Tomorrow you're going to see a whole bunch of booths that talk about we use AI. We don't use AI. I'm going to be upfront. Sure, the marketing material will do that, but you can blame marketing for using that. We have no AI. Now, what we do use is ML models, and in my documentation, I will be upfront and I'll tell you the exact ML model we use. It is LightGBM. It's a framework boosting model, and that model is what we use to train your data, number one. Number two, the agents that sit on your servers, it'll send data, you can choose to send it outside to a tenant that we create for you specifically. So for example, you said Tata Digital. I might create something called tatadigital.nonamesecurity.com. That's infrastructure that's built out for you. Now you can send data over there. That's point number one. But what we can do is what Chinmay talked about is we can deploy an engine within your environment. So all the data stays within your environment under your control, and you can delete it at any point. I'll further add over here is there two separate things that we can do for customers who are absolutely finicky. First of all, we encrypt all data under AES 256. But what's even better is if you really bother me, I will tell you, go bring your own key. You encrypt your own data with your own key. Leave me alone. You're done. You're dusted. You're sorted. Now, sir, you'll need to repeat your question number 2 because I forgot it.
Yeah, the second is related to CI/CD part, how this API security is integrated from the time developer is raising a PR pull request and eventually it gets to the pipeline itself.
Sure.
Before you answer that.
Sure.
So just one point which I want to add over there is, when we collect any data, like you said, if there is any PI data and we collect samples of to show you as an evidence, we obfuscate that data the moment we collect it, right? We don't store those logs. We only collect the metadata that is needed for us to show you that, hey, this is what we received as an output. So if there's a username, if we say that there's an email ID that is being leaked, we will show you an obfuscated email ID so that even the administrator of this solution does not get to see what's being leaked at. Just wanted to add that.
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. I'll tell you how we do that. Let's say you find Sheldon's PAN card number and we identify it as a PAN card. We add a salt to that PAN card value. Then we run it through a hash function. Once the output of that hash function, we drop the last few characters so that no one can reverse engineer it. There's a concept called rainbow table attacks, where even if you can guess the salt, you'll be able to reverse it. But in this case, you won't be able to do that because for all intents and purposes, you've destroyed it. To your CI/CD pipeline question, we integrate with Azure DevOps, GitHub, whatever else you have. actions. And what we can do is in the testing module, as soon as you run your CI/CD pipeline, we can automate tests. And if any of the tests come up as critical, high, medium, low, we can go ahead and kill your pipeline so nothing else really goes out. That's essentially what we do. We're not doing a whole bunch of
Okay,
rockets.
in this case, like the connection will be, say, as you mentioned about, say, GitHub or Azure DevOps, right? Connection will be from the Azure DevOps to the like agent which is placed on our premises or
Yes,
stuff, right?
yes.
In order to do the scanning.
Yes, we can deploy like a Docker agent within an environment that has access to the API, so it can run the APIs, test it out. And just to be super clear, like we are not a full DaaS solution. The API test cases that we have is specifically for OWASP API top 10. That's sort of the guiding light. We're not trying to be a Qualys. We're not trying to be any of these large DaaS tools.
Thanks.
Just one more thing on top of that, which Shelly said, is that while we have that info, while we are being another stage in your CI/CD pipeline, right, before your code merges with your main pipeline, we are also in our findings pointing out that who was the last person to commit, right? That gives you an ease, and because we can integrate with ServiceNow and Jira, automatically it creates a ticket for the respective team if you can just like get that integration going through. So it's going to have all the requirements, remediation steps, what we see, why is it wrong, what can happen, and how do you fix it, along with to the respective team.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Who wants to go next? I know there are a couple.
Sorry, I have the mic, so let me speak.
Yes, go for it.
On a lighter note. So you started the presentation with MCP.
Yes.
So two questions. How does this interact and integrate with MCP? And the second is, when you're looking at the MCP construct of agent-to-agent communication as well as the agentic AI, the tendency would be that most of those particular requests that are going to be viewed by the system are going to come in from the same MCP server, which is the same IP address. So how would you differentiate an attacker versus a genuine kind of a particular traffic?
Sure. So let me clarify a little bit more about the MCP part, right? So when you have an MCP server, essentially you decide what quote unquote tools are going to be available to the agentic AI, right? So let's say you install your MCP server, it has accesses to three pieces, TRP, tools, resources, and prompts. Now from the tools, essentially tools is access to internal APIs, external APIs, whatever else you might have, and you choose which APIs get exposed to that. That's point number one. Now, what Akamai's API security solution was doing is nothing around MCP servers right now. Our product managers are still trying to understand what the larger audience need, what people like you need. So if you have some ideas, go ahead and ask us. What we are trying to do right now is just protect the fundamental unit pieces of APIs, and that's where we are. Now, let's say if there's an agent out there asking for example, I have a demo that maybe I can show you sometime later is, give me the bank balance of everybody, right? Which is essentially a BOLA. Like, can the agent go ahead and say, enumerate all the account IDs and then make requests for all of them? So that is where Akamai API security would come in. We would understand that typically an IP, whether it is internal or external, doesn't ask for so many things, right? We've built behavioral baselines to understand that a consumer would ask for one ID, right? And just to give you a little more background about how, and you should do this for all your API security vendors, is ask them exactly how are they solving for BOLA, right? Broken Object Level Authorization, because this is an extremely difficult piece to solve for. And the way you do it is you have to understand whether an API has a one-to-one mapping, a one-to-many mapping, a many-to-many mapping, so on and so forth. So to understand this is going to be critical. And I'll be, again, I know it's being recorded, so it's weird, but this is extremely difficult even for us to solve. So the only way we've been able to understand this so far is by building a behavioral anomaly system to understand that when Chinmay asks for this, first of all, I need to understand who the user is, his JOT file, his IP address, his whoever. Then how often does one person ask for 2 resources versus 1 resource versus 10 resources? And that's the whole part of it, right? So your question, I think, I'm not sure if I completely answered it, but you asked how will the IP or how will we understand an IP is asking for multiple resources? Was that correct, sir, or do you want to add?
So, see, practically what you're doing is the MCP server
Yes.
would go back and funnel all those particular requests.
Yes.
And it can behave in very different ways. Obviously, MCP will have those tools, resources, and all those particular data points. So it can behave based on the type of request and the inference basically being made. It can change its static, number one. And the second is what the servers will start seeing is you're going to just see it from one particular IP address. So from a threat modeling standpoint, you're going ahead and you will not get that particular level of intelligence, whether it's coming in from a IP that's been attacking or thing. It's one IP.
Sure.
So how I think,
Yeah.
I know it's evolution, so if it's evolving,
No,
I can take a step back on that question.
No, and let me attempt one more time. If not, we'll take it offline. But essentially, whenever a request comes in, so in the MCP world, you'll have an MCP host, you have an MCP client, and one of the benefits for MCP is you don't show the authentication that's actually taking place, right? It's abstracted away from the client. However, at the end of the day, you still need to authorize yourself. There'll still be an authorization token. For example, Zomato, that we all love, already has an MCP server that's out there. And right now, they have only whitelisted Claude, OpenAPI, and a few other tools. Even when you integrate your MCP client to the MCP host, you need to do an OAuth integration. So even then, Zomato would still know who you are and who's making this order, right? There'll still be some aspect of knowing who the end user is asking, and therefore I still have the capability of building some profiles and understanding how these APIs are being used. So that's my initial answer, but I'm happy to take it offline.
We'll take it offline and go deeper.
Sure. Excellent.
Hi, I'm Vikas from
Hey,
Moody's
Vikas.
Corporation.
Yes.
The question is particularly around the discovery piece of it. So how do you go about discovering APIs and connectors, between SaaS to SaaS applications, let's say, because that's something, outside your boundary totally, to maybe give, or also maybe, if you can, in the context of the latest incident that happened around Salesforce, SalesLoft, what's your take, and is there a way that, you can help around with something around that?
Sure. And just to clarify, here we're talking about third-party APIs that you don't own.
Precisely.
Yeah, sure. So third-party APIs is a little difficult because essentially the tool that we've been talking about is discovering your own APIs because you host them and you want to protect your own APIs. Now, when you start consuming third-party APIs, there's a little bit of visibility that we can provide. The concept over here is hopefully all third-party calls are still going out through an API gateway and not just willy-nilly, as in like some random server making calls. If your APIs all go out through an API gateway and I have visibility against that gateway, then I can provide visibility into all the third-party APIs you're making calls to, what data is going out and what data going in, right? And then I'll be able to build behavioral anomaly based on that. The way my sensors work, and just to give a little more idea about sensors, because I'm sure this question might come up or might not come up, is how do you read encrypted data and so on and so forth. And the answer is pretty simple. We've not developed anything crazy by ourselves. Our strategy is going to be using something called extended Berkeley packet filters, EPBF filters, because they hook on to the Linux kernel level and they have ability to read data using SSL read, SSL write features that is part of Linux. So I can still see HTTPS traffic. And as long as my sensor is sitting at your gateway and you promise me that all the third-party calls are going through that gateway, I should provide some visibility for you.
Understood, that's helpful. And then another one was around, when you also mentioned about the discovery of the data exposure particularly, what's the approach there, that you follow? Is it purely on metadata or how does that work? Right?
Sure. Again, fairly simple and elegant solution that we've incorporated is we have a data type list of 145 different data types that we identify. So and we obviously have full visibility into post bodies and post requests and so on and so forth. So as long as we read the data and it quote unquote matches our regex, we say, okay, this is a GitHub ID, this is an AWS ARN, this is a S3 bucket, so on and so forth. What we do for the Indian context is, for example, PAN card. PAN card has a fairly simple regex. I think the first four characters are letters, first 5 characters are letters, then 4 characters of numbers, and the last one is a letter again. So because I can build a regex for it, every time a PAN card comes in or out, I understand it. But what the system does very, very nicely is you can mark these data types as sensitive. So the moment we understand that there's a high volume of sensitive data going out, when normally this API doesn't carry so much data, then we start raising flags that, hey, why would this API start shoveling out all these PAN card details? That's when, insurance attacks that happen over the year, that's how we catch them. Like, this is not normal. I'll give you another example. There's an insurance provider that's using the solution, and what they do is they've created a data type, and very smartly, they've created a data type to match for VIN numbers that are non-masked. So you can create a negative match for regex saying that anything that does not have an asterisk and is a VIN number and is going under a response, please highlight, because VIN numbers should not go out. Right? Chassis numbers should not go out unmasked. So they've used our solution and created an even better, more elegant solution to identify such data going out. But hopefully that helps. Yes.
This is Armeet Singh from Midland Credit. So
Sure.
my question is more on the governance side of it.
Sure.
So organizations big time struggle on having the entire inventory of the APIs and have the entire visibility around it. So how Akamai is going to help me in terms of having the visibility of the shadow APIs as well as the legacy and the ROG endpoints, so that I can put a control and mitigate that risk?
Sure. I'll start off with the bad news first. Quick show of hands. Anybody's developers over here have spec files already created for your APIs? A full-blown spec file? I would assume not. Now, the only way, so let's define what a shadow API is or what a zombie API is. A shadow API is an API where a developer, and we'll probably talk about it in a bit, a developer has created an API for his testing purpose or her testing purpose, and they have not documented it anywhere. But if the larger Indian audience of developers don't even document simple APIs, then everything is a shadow API technically. No one knows what APIs are there. So shadow APIs are a little difficult. Zombie APIs are APIs that we have created, maybe V1, maybe V2, and we have eventually moved on to a new version, and that's essentially a zombie API. It was alive, but now dead, but still alive in the code. So that's zombie versus shadow. Now, how does Akamai solve for this? If you give me a spec file, not only Akamai, but every other solution in the market will be able to tell you that you've given me 5 APIs in your spec file. I'm seeing 4. 4 minus 5, that 1 is your shadow API. Now, this is not possible because, again, Indian audience, companies don't have spec files. So what we do, and this is where Chinmay sort of talked about it, is our new venture is to start looking at your code base. Akamai can, today, as we speak today, we have 4 languages and I think about 5 different frameworks. If you're using GitHub, I will scan your GitHub code base and tell you which APIs you have there. Because I need some monicum of truth of these are the APIs that exist. Then I can look at your traffic and say 4 minus 5, this is the one API that is documented in your code. मैं इसका कोई traffic नहीं मिल रहा है. That's my shadow API. Zombie API, how do I do it? Let's say day 0, you start using my solution. I can have filters saying that I have not seen this API in the last 7 days. I have not seen this API in the last 30 days, so on and so forth. I can give you a very nice list of all the APIs. You take it back to the developer and say, we are not seeing this API anymore. Have you removed this from code base? Is this dead? So on and so forth. That's the only way you can solve for a zombie API, a shadow API, an orphan API.
What is the accuracy rate?
It all depends on how well it's documented in your GitHub at this point, right? That's where we are. There won't be an accuracy. There can't be a chance for false positive because either the data is there or it's not there. So it's more binary. If you're not, the only reason why it can be a false positive is we are seeing the data, but then suddenly आपने sensor ही निकाल दिया. Then obviously to our tool is be like data नहीं आ रहा है. So then this is a zombie API or a shadow API. But it's more of a 0 or 1 that either the API is alive or not alive. So
Thanks.
sure. Any other questions? I have a question over there.
Hi, I'm Priyanshu Khanwala from Nayara Energy.
Sure.
I have one question around broken object authentication. Yeah, I mean, obviously, there is one particular insurance company you mentioned about they using your solution around the same. So just help me understand. There are a lot of these service providers who come up with SaaS softwares, COTS applications, web-based. Obviously, all of them are web-based, but yeah. And we often come across this challenge of identifying this particular vulnerability. Obviously, it would take some time to fix it, correct? Because you need to have the tokens issued in a particular way, the expiry of the tokens and whatnot. But is there a way that Akamai can help initially prevent some of these vulnerabilities being exploited, and then subsequently it gets fixed at a later stage?
Okay, so in the OWASP API top 10, there are like two different broken objects. There's broken object level authorization, that is, if I log into my bank account, I change the bank account ID, and then I access Chinmay's bank account and I see his bank balance. That's one level.
Yeah, I'm talking about that particular, the first one.
Yeah, okay, cool. Because then there's a BOPLA as well. But this one, and like I said, I've been fairly transparent that this is extremely difficult to solve for. I'll give you two examples. So I would have mentioned about how Akamai acquired two separate companies. One was NeoSec, which is an Israeli-based company, and the second one is No Name, also an Israeli-based company. They're just really good at creating these solutions. NeoSec had a very elegant but slightly strenuous way of identifying it. You would have to go into the application and say that this API is a one-to-one consumer mapping, saying that this API can only be used by one user, and this is the user ID, or this is how you identify a user. So they were able to do it really well. This solution that we're currently doing is completely based on ML modeling, where we try to assume that a consumer, whether it be a JOT file, whether it be a session ID, that this session ID, this JOT file, this user, this cookie accesses this application only once or twice.
That is difficult to do in a scalable solution, specifically when you have so many end user consumers coming in.
Correct, absolutely. And that is why NeoSec's solution, while good, was difficult because it relied on the fact that the end user had to know every API and how that one-to-one mapping one-to-one. This solution does it through behavioral anomaly, and it's going to assume certain things. And that is where then you start to balance FP versus TP, right? True positive versus false positive. And that is where people like us come into you, not come to you, but work with you to sort of solve for this. So
see, actually, it's a temporary problem, till the time, we have found it, it has to be resolved, it has to be solved. So it's just like a temporary patch.
Absolutely. And I mean, again, like I said, difficult one for us to solve, although marketing always talks about BOLA because that's the most easiest to talk about. It's a difficult one to solve, but we are there along with our partners to sort of help you fix that. And you can create workflows saying that, and the cool part is we didn't talk about workflows, but you can create workflows saying that if there's a BOLA and the attacker confidence is 99 and it's coming from a bad IP.
Ask for a second factor or...
No, not ask for a second factor, but go ahead and block the IP. Second factor we can do, that's probably not the solution, but Akamai has this other solution, which is we're talking about a different solution over here, is called Account Protector, where I start mapping population databases to how they log in. So like, for example, if there's a food aggregator app in India and everybody uses it typically after 7 p.m. and there's a spike for Saturdays, Sundays, but suddenly there's an IP that is logging in from Norway at 3 o'clock in the morning and logging into Chinmay's account, then I can throw a second factor authentication and stop them. But that's more account takeover, not really BOLA.
Okay.
Cool. Awesome. There's a question at the end over there, I believe. I think there's a mic on this side. Oh, sorry. Sure. So one of the two. You want to go first?
Yeah. Dr. Bharat Saraf from PhonePe Limited.
Yes.
I had data privacy.
Perfect.
Wanted to understand from a privacy standpoint, when you're talking about discovery, have you all also thought about DPDP compliance? From a standpoint, I think to the gentleman's question earlier, is this only about discovering APIs or in general discovering, classifying all data that's there in my systems? Because we do work together, right?
Yes.
On a lot of API-related aspects. But just want to understand how y'all can elevate this particular tooling to meet the DPDP compliance requirement, one from a discovery standpoint, second maybe from a data principal request standpoint, and third, maybe from a breach management standpoint, because these are three critical aspects under DPDP compliance.
Sure. Man, that's a difficult one. So let's break it down. We have a bunch of different frameworks that we're already looking at. So there's a report that generates a bunch of compliances. We have PCI compliance, GDPR compliance, FAPI compliance. We have DORA compliance, not DPDP yet. So that's something that we need to figure out how to do it yet. So that's WIP with Akamai. Now you mentioned org data. Can you expand on org data? I think you used.
No, I meant not only APIs, but all data.
All data.
That's there in our ecosystem.
No, okay, perfect. So Akamai solution only takes a look at API data that's flowing in specifically, especially since you are using Akamai already, the native connector that we use will only look at application/JSON types, content types. So we're going to only look at that. How do we classify that? Like I said, we are basically scanning through the data. As long as you have a matching regex data type, we are able to classify it and encrypt it and keep it safely. DPDP, I've seen different customers use it very, very interestingly. I have one customer that what they've done is, because they don't have a spec file, I believe, and you correct me if I'm wrong, one of the requirements for DPDP is so that there's no changes in API, like new data type that sort of flows with it. So what they've done is, Akamai gives you the ability to create, rather download the spec file that we have created based on the traffic. You download that spec file and then upload that spec file back to us, and we use that as day zero. So the moment your API start changing, there is a feature within Akamai API security to tell you that there is a drift in compliance. That you had an API that had these 4 fields, but now the developer has changed the SQL query that's downstream that's leading to 5 other fields coming in. I can start telling you that the spec file, there's a drift in the spec file, it's not complying to the document, and then sort of raise a flag for you. But we don't have a full formal dashboard to tell you about DPDP at this point.
Sure, thanks.
Sumit Kokani from WNS.
Yes.
The question I have is that you mentioned some time back that Akamai solution can't have the visibility on third-party APIs without API gateways. So do you integrate with any third-party API gateways, or do you have fixed set of API gateways that you can integrate with? And second question, I think a lot of people have already asking for one more time in a different way, is that with the organization who does not have API gateways or have multiple API gateways, how do you fit in terms of architecturally into the discovery part of it?
Sure, absolutely. So just to clarify the first question, right? How do you monitor third-party APIs? So for example, I had a customer ask me, Sheldon, we use an HRMS platform that sits outside of our environment, and we're sending, let's say, Aadhaar card, PAN card. We want to be a little careful about how our HR uses this application. As long as the API, so in any environment, you'll have an egress point, right? A DMZ egress point. And what I'm saying is, if we can integrate with that egress point, then I should be able to provide you some visibility into the APIs that are going outbound. Now, which all gateways do we comply with? There's a whole list. I'm not going to sit. I don't want to talk about each one of them, but the simple ones like your F5s, your Kongs, your Nginx, we comply with all of them, right? So as long as you have one of those, we can sit over there. The number of integrations are quite large, and that is one of the reasons why Akamai even bought No Name. The reason we bought No Name is twofold. One is pedigree. These folks, before Akamai bought them, were already working with some of the large pharmaceuticals in the United States. I'll throw probably names out later. And second is they had the largest set of integrations available. So even if you give me nothing and you say, Sheldon, I can give you logs, I'll ingest your logs. If you say, Sheldon, I can't give you anything, but I can give you NIC cards, I'll integrate with NIC cards as well. So we will figure out a way to do it. If there's nothing else, there's at least Unix sitting in the background, there's some Ubuntu server, I can integrate with that as well. So so far I'm not saying everything is easy, it's somewhat difficult, but it can be done. Excellent. Any other questions? How are we doing for time? Where's my marketing person? He's not in the room. Wow. We have only 5 to 7 minutes. Then you know what? Okay. Okay. Cool. I think there's another question over there. Yes.
So I understood
So I'm the CISO for Go Digit Insurance, General Insurance.
Wow.
So I understood you can very well discover the APIs, but does your solution also provide a visibility that how which API is interacting with which API, kind of mapping like a end to end? Does it give that as well?
We do have a tool. It's we turn it on in the background. It can give you some visibility into API call sequencing, if that's what you're talking about. I know there's one vendor that really pushes that out, and it might be a useful feature. We haven't seen it really being used a lot. I understand why it could be useful, because if you have a specific workflow saying that everyone needs to log in before accessing this API, and I want to make sure that they've logged in, therefore the call sequencing. Go ahead. You want to add something?
No, that's perfectly correct. And then because one API, then to the next API like payments, one is more like some functionality.
Sure.
So there will be like going
a workflow. Yeah. No, fair enough. So we don't, we can do call flow. We can build it out not only from your API, but even from your infrastructure. So the really cool part is the moment I start integrating with your AWS or Azure and you have tagging, your tag game is good, I can start building out the way the APIs are being called within your infrastructure to give you that understanding, and then you can automatically start doing like tagging of owners and so forth. But yes, we can do it, but not, we haven't seen a whole lot of success with what do you do past that? Are you putting controls into place? You are blocking or not? Sorry. But yes, it is possible in a certain way. So both from an infrastructure standpoint and from a call log standpoint. I don't know if we have enough time for the case study. That's what I think we have only 6 minutes, 7 minutes. So I'll tell you what we were trying to do. We were told that we need to keep this super interactive, so we had created a case study based on some real data that we've seen. So I've been doing the DSCI masterclass for API security for now 3 years, and every year we learn a whole lot from our customers about all the new breaches. So we just amalgamated all of them and sort of created a case study that we could sort of walk through. I'll give it to you guys. We can hand out the paperwork. I don't know how long we have to discuss this.
Let's show that. Let's run through it.
Oh. Okay, sure, absolutely. So essentially what happened is, so this is the 72-hour breach, right? So day 1 or day 0 rather, a developer created a very simple API called debug, and imagine this to be an insurance company where before applying for an insurance, you essentially have to get a score to see how much of an insurance or how much of the rate of interest is going to be, right? So essentially what this developer did is they created it, and like all good things that were not supposed to go into production, it did go into production. And that is where the initial breach happened, right? So that's the issue. Day 2 essentially is the discovery, where a threat actor, as usual, they were running Nmap scans, if you're familiar with Nmaps, and essentially they were running through multiple different things to see if an API existed, and eventually they did find this API. They found a diagnostic API. They ran it through. They ran a simple partner key that was available, and what they quickly discovered is that there was no guardrails against this API, right? As soon as they made a request, they were able to get the testing, the score data for your insurance out there. Scaling, this is where the attacker essentially said, okay, let me try scaling this out. They use a bunch of different APIs, different IP addresses, and enumerated the customer details. And this is real. As much as we like to believe that customers don't have enumeration type attempts of customer IDs, many times they do. The solve is fairly simple. When you create your SQL data table, you can tell that keep a unique key for every customer. Sometimes they don't do that. And in this case, they were able to pull out a whole bunch of information. And then finally on day 3, the attacker stopped. And the only way this company, and this is real, this company, the only way they found out that loans were going out is when the bank essentially talked to them and said, hey, there's a high volume of activity. We're handing out all these loans. What's sort of happening? And then that's when they finally figured out that they were being abused. And it took about 72 hours for them to understand the breach, right? And lastly is the impact summary. Like, okay, what was the impact of this? We saw 1.75 lakh of profiles going out. PAN cards were out, but they were hashed, so they were lucky about that. Phone numbers, employee data, and so on and so forth. Obviously, certain, if you guys know, the compliance needs to go out in 6 hours. DPDP obligations and RBI stuff, right? So this was the impact. Now, my plan was to, if you guys are not so interactive, so thank you for being interactive, was force you to talk about discovery, posture, runtime, and what would you have done as CISOs, CXOs to prevent this, right? I think the first one, and we should definitely talk about that, is I know when I was a developer, I worked on AngularJS. How do you prevent someone from deploying an API without actually marking it, right? I know also the other side of it is creating spec files is super tedious. No one wants to create that. But then how do you stop someone from creating a diagnostic API just to see that, hey, my API is working, right? So that's the discovery part of it. But I am going to rely on these folks over here to see what do we want to do? Do we want to run through each one? Oh, question. Go ahead. I like questions. Yes. Yep.
If you were to integrate with their asset inventory and then mark it to the respective owners, will be pivotal. Without which your SOC, even if you monitor and then tag, the gold hour is lost in just trying to identify who the owner of a particular API is.
Yes.
So, is there a solution within Akamai, no name specifically, if that problem is resolved? Because I see this, even if you don't call it to be API posture management tool, with discovery, the GRC built in, and then you also talked about the vulnerability and the runtimes and the monitoring. So I'm hoping that it will be integrated with SOC and then getting into the incident management piece. So tying all of those pieces, if you don't have the central piece, which is the owner tie-up, is half the solution. So I'm just looking at if that is a solution that's already provided, or is that there in the roadmap of the tool?
Okay. Short answer, yes, it's available. I'll talk about how we do ownership tagging. And something that we at Akamai are really good at is the management of this whole API security solution. So I remember when I was talking to the original no-name teams, so they created this framework called OUS, which is organize your APIs, understand your APIs, and then the last piece is to secure your APIs. So organization and understanding of the API is super important. How do we do it, sir? We do it based on, let's say, if you are integrating with AWS or Azure and you have tags. I talked about tags, right? We're able to pick up API, the tags for, let's say, Kubernetes services or ALB services. And then on those tags, we can then automatically start assigning owners. So as soon as the API starts coming in, we read the tag, we can assign owners. That's one way. Second way, if you tell me there's a regex based on the URL pattern that anything under /shop belongs to team A, anything under /lend belongs to team B, I can automatically do that. So there are different ways of either looking at the tags, the headers, anything you give me, I can create a rule set and start tagging owners. That's how I do it.
Yeah, but the broader question is ability to integrate with the existing asset inventories. Because I don't think many organizations currently have API inventories and the ownership tied in automatically, but they would want to build in with their asset inventories. That's an automated solution.
Oh, you're saying tie it back to your asset inventory.
That's right. Because that's a scalable solution for us to be able to do it when we are talking about SOC. Because when you're talking about thousands running into multiple tens of thousands of these APIs, doing tagging and then having to tag the APIs will be a humongous task, the owners.
Sure. So like I said, I know we can tag API owners based on infrastructure tags, based on different URL patterns, and we can give you who the API owner is within my tool. How do we tag it to an asset management inventory tool? I'll have to take a look at it. So I'm not sure about that. That I will take back with me. Okay, awesome. I think we're good for time.
I think yes. Did everybody go through the document? So
feedback, yes. Sorry, hold on, my marketing boy. Yeah. There is a feedback form that you need to fill out.
Done.
Okay, it's done. Wait, where is it?
No, I recommend you take the feedback after we do the next exercise.
Oh, okay. There's another exercise?
Yes.
Okay.
So I will take the liberty of knowing people, and I will be requesting you to individually come here. For those who have interacted for the first time, please pardon me. I will have to look through your name cards to call you out. I will use these sheets. If anybody has not signed up here, can you kindly raise your hand? Okay. So I will take a minute to just get this sorted quickly. If you just add your name. Yeah. this part is all covered, right? Everybody is through? Who was the other one here? Anybody on this table? No, okay. This first one only. So before we head out for lunch, just getting ready, what we are planning to do is we will have an individual photo up here where we will request you to join us. Who's going to felicitate?
What?
Sheldon?
What?
I like surprises, so I have surprise for you that you have to do a felicitation. We'll call out people one by one.
Sure.
It will buy us some time for the lunch, to be honest. We believe in serving hot food.
Okay.
See, when you're a host, and that too, when you have this big a scale, we'll have to plan those nitty-gritties well. So most of the time, whenever I have this conversation with the CISO friends, they say, "Dulan ki vidai ka time kab hai?" So I say, "Excellence Awards ki raat ko." So 5th, by the way, for those who are for first time joining us, this is actually a 3-day extravaganza. We start day 1 with these master classes, roundtables, which flows into day 2 and day 3 as well. But day 3 is where the world comes together. How many of you are competing this time for Excellence Award? Good. I was actually scared when I saw no hands up. So this is one of the highly sought after awards. For those who have not filed in this year, please do it next year. It's a zero financial award in terms of there's no fee for applying, first and foremost. And there's no leverage of getting an award also because of that. But jokes apart, the fact is there's a jury which decides upon that credential basis what you submit as your response for those applications. But yes, please bring your best foot forward and apply for those awards because it's highly sought after award in the industry. I think this year we have more than 600 nominations. So you can imagine the kind of hard work the jury needs to put in. So next year, make it tougher for them. As simple as that. Because if all of you apply, just imagine. Because there are multiple ways in which you apply. You apply for a security leader of the year, best organization for security practices, privacy practices, and women leadership award. So a lot of awards are there. So you should definitely apply for them. I'm sorry? I hope there's no API integrations there. Okay, is the sheet ready? Everybody is filled in? Okay. Thank you so much. Okay, shall I go sheet-wise? Because it will be easier. Anybody left on this side? You're left? Okay. Oh, you're saying there's no, okay, you can write right on top of it. Please pass this. I'm still doing discovery. But I'm not taking any PI data. And the one that I took has your consent. See, actually, see, that's the beauty of law, right? That's why I'm doing, see, in-person stuff.
Very cool.
Yeah, please. Great point. Let me clarify that also. So what happens is when we create sectoral awards, which we used to do, and we do it also, even in this year's awards, we'll have that. Challenge is we need 3 nominations minimum. Because if we don't get that, it's like race mein main first aaya aur akela bhag raha tha. So that is where the challenge lies. So we need 3 nominations to get filed in. And one of the things, and I'm using this opportunity right now, when you file in for those applications, when you file in those applications for the awards, do not restrict yourself. wherever you cannot. Because the moment you are analyzed on what you are filing in, basis that. So many a times organizations, particularly leaders, because that's the toughest thing that happens to me after the awards are disclosed, huh? Because everybody wants it. And they will start coming to me saying that why did I not win it? I think one of the biggest problem is the disclosures. The way you are presenting that application. You may be doing great stuff, but if you're not focusing on that while applications are on, I think there's a gap. Because the jury, I'm going to just voice it for the jury that they need to analyze apples versus apples, right? If there is a criteria, it needs to be adhered to. If it's not meeting it, unfortunately, it won't pass through. Even if you're doing great work. Okay, so I have the list ready. Probably a little movement challenge will happen, so we'll have to give some time. I will start with the first name, Priyanshu. If I can request you to join us here once.
I have to give it.
And your badge, are you carrying your badge? Please scan this once. Yes, yes. I told you I'm buying time for the food to get hot. Satyavat. But he needs to scan it also, na? And there's a photo op. Why to miss that? Akanksha, if I can request you to join. So I'm not following any other form, I'm just following the sheet. Huh? Don't think that I'm biased to someone. You've not filled in. Just check your name if you have. This sheet only. This I'm not. I will not comment. That's okay, it's not a problem. That's not a problem. I will not comment. I think it's Piyush. Actually, you should have a photo up also. Anand. You have to set the trend. Photographer भाई साहब इधर 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 ऐसी कोई शादी हुई है जिसमें किसी ने कभी गाली नहीं खाई हो सुमित विकास हरिप्रसाद नतीश सुमेश राजेश कुमार नहीं हुआ नहीं लेकिन यार एक फोटो ले लो अब करो राजेश जी एक बार हो गया ओके शाहिद जी This is interesting. कर दिया स्कैन राजकुमार पुनिया सतनाम सिंह Armit. Then we have Devendra. Manoj. Manoj Singh. Balbir Singh. Manoj Mahapatra. Sanjay Saxena. I think it's Sanjay, right? No. Sanjay. Sanjay Saxena. For those who have been felicitated, your food is ready. Devki Nandan. Rahul Natm. Sahil Gupta. Maninder. Bharat. Akshay Sharma. Naseem Ahmed. Anju Dhar. Nitin Chauhan. Atul Goyal. Pratik Agarwal. अभी ये करके फिर अक्षय मंजरी. उत्तम. राजेश गुप्ता. उनको नहीं. रंजीत शर्मा. क्लोज. Senthil Kumar. Abhimanyu Prakash. Bhudev. S. Maharajan. Manish Bonai. Uma Chandrasekhar.